Welcome to Onward Lebanon. I'm Isaac Sievers, Superintendent of Lebanon City Schools. I'm excited to join you every month to talk about our district, our people, our programs, our community. One of the things we've decided to do this year is really take a focused look at how are we leading schools in the digital age? What does it look like in terms of our policies, the programming that we offer, the resources that we offer to students and families? I would encourage you to go back and look at some of the things we've done so far this year as we've looked at our cell phone implementation, and the change in policy that happened over the summer. We talk about the mental health impacts of students in social media and cell phone time. We talk about the resources that we're offering inside of our district walls to support kids as they work through this time. We've also had some discussions with parents where we've discussed what does it look like to parent teenagers in this digital era. I'm excited today because this discussion is going to invite in two great teachers from Berry Intermediate Schools, Lindsay and TJ Collins. Welcome to the show today.
Hi.
Hi, thank you.
So excited to have you guys here. I've been hearing a lot about you for the last 2 years. Obviously, you know my son Owen, and he loved having you in class. So I feel like I know you a lot, right? I'm excited to get to talk to you today just about this role. And typically on the show, we like to talk about what we're doing inside of our school buildings, right? What is it, the programs that we have? What are we doing to help support kids and things there? What we're trying to do this year is have discussions, yes, about school, but also are there things that we can have in terms of discussions about what's happening outside of school, right? Resources for parents, more information and insight into what's going on in students' lives. Not that we have all the answers, right? I don't want you guys to feel like, we're putting parents, or parents feel bad in terms of what we're talking about here, but just the idea of as we learn things as educators, right? How does that change who we are as people? How does it change who we are as educators? And so really just a discussion today about the journey that you're on as a couple, as parents, as educators, and I think really tying into this look we've had this year as a district around cell phones, around social media, screen time for kids. Right. So I'm going to start by a discussion the three of us had briefly in the hallway at the DPC. So opening day, we roll out to staff, no more cell phones into junior high and high school. We talked a little bit about the research of the impact of cell phone and screen time on kids. And the two of you came up to me in the hallway, were like, I would love to have this conversation with you. We read a book. We went down this rabbit hole, right, and I think the book was Glow Kids. Yeah. And so really just the excitement I saw in you that day of like, we're passionate about this. Yeah. As teachers, we're passionate about this as parents and as human beings. So tell me a little bit about either one of you, right? Let's start the conversation. What was Glow Kids? Why did you read it? And what was the takeaway from you that said like, I want to dig into this more?
I mean, I can say even way back before we had our own children, like right before our first daughter, we had made a pact with each other that we were like, anytime we went out to eat or we were sitting down at dinner as a family, we would never ever have our cell phones out, and we would never ever give our cell phone to one of our kids for entertainment. So that was even before I even went down a rabbit hole and read Glow Kids. So we made that pact and that, vow to each other, and we have followed it to a T to this day. And it was 2 summers ago. Ironically, I follow someone on social media, another teacher. And
you found us on social media.
I know, right? It's really ironic. But she said, a book you have to read is Glow Kids. So I read it 2 years ago, and it was right after school went out. And I remember sitting out in our backyard while our kids are playing, and I'm reading this book. And he read it through me because I kind of read the whole book to him. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, look at this, listen to this. And it was really all about the dangers of social media, cell phone, brain stimulation. And it talked, there were a lot of big words in it about brain development, addiction and how it works, and what social media or video games are like constantly. And you can probably fill in the blanks a little bit with like,
I mean, just like the dopamine release that you get from the way you might design something, and it's to get people hooked. And I mean, we would talk about people we knew in our own life of maybe who we could like see kind of aspects of it here or there, or like even times in our own life if we had noticed being on something too long, or you look at your screen report at the end of the week and it's way more than you think, and just kind of how it compounds and grows over time. And then when we started like a family and then you have children, it's something that you start thinking about even more. And Glow Kids talked about like, I mean, it's social and emotional health and becoming like addicted to technology almost.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like a snowball effect. You know, you really want to do something, you have to do something because it's constantly feeding your brain that feeling of enjoyment or pleasure. And so we keep doing it, but then, you know, you have your lack of sleep and then you have a poor diet and it just kind of snowballs to affect the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And then it affects your relationship. So it talks all about children and their brain development. And in Glow Kids, it says you should never let a child have a screen until they're 12 years old. And I mean, I'm not perfect. We're not perfect parents. And we have tablets for our own children. So, and that was before we read this book.
Before
and then
we
I
went
read
down
this
the
book
rabbit
and I was
hole.
like, oh my gosh, what have I
What
done?
did we
You're
do?
like, I've got that Kindle. They've been
Yep.
playing on their
Right.
own Kindle Fire,
Right.
and all those
Right.
things.
Yeah.
Right. We think we're doing things for the right reason. I remember like, and I remember thinking as when my children were your age, and I'll be honest with you, like I'm kind of jealous, right? To go back and be at your guys' age with children. How old are your kids, by the way?
we have 6,
Charlie's
5,
6
and 3.
Yep,
6, 5, and 3.
Yeah.
And so I think about that period of time in our life, right? Now we're at 12, 14, and 16. And if we were watching PBS Kids.
Mm-hmm.
We were controlling as what we could control.
Right.
But we were also like, hey, I want my kid to read. And so I give them an Amazon, Kindle pad or whatever it was, or their Fire pad. And I think about that and I'm like, they had books at their reading level. They had the ability to do things. And it seemed educational.
Right.
But it was hooking them.
It was.
It
Right.
totally was.
And that's how it started for us too. We got them because we talked about it, and there are the educational apps and everything that's on there.
Yeah.
But like you said, they get hooked, and then we can see their stress levels rise when maybe we tell them like that's enough for the day, or if we're taking a break from them altogether. Like the emotional response that you get. I mean, the more that they're on it, the stronger that response is.
Yeah.
And it eliminates conversation. It eliminates human interaction. And so even with our young kids, they're learning so many social skills right now. So we feel like we are ahead of the game in controlling how much they're on a screen and giving them more opportunities to interact in more, face-to-face peer interaction.
Yeah. So, you started, and I'm using your words here, right? You started down a rabbit hole. I went back and made sure that I didn't make that up.
No.
You wrote that to me in an email, right?
Yeah.
You went down this rabbit hole, right? Like, so Glow Kids was sort of the entry point for you, right? And you started thinking about, just your eyes get open to this, right? It's an awareness thing at this point in time. What changed, if anything? I'm assuming your kids still have tablets, right? Right? What changed? What concerns you about maybe what you saw in your own kids or what you saw in other kids that sort of said, I need to know more about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think like one perfect example is they had their tablets and we came home from work one day and my mom was babysitting and they happened to all three be on them. And when I walked into the living room, I was like, hey guys, I'm home. Like no response at all. They were just locked in. And I was like, and that's mine, that's mine, that's mine.
So it was one of those when the tablet becomes more important than mommy or daddy, like we knew there was a problem.
Yeah. And so that was the biggest change for me where I realized it wasn't really even their fault. It was my fault, honestly, for setting them up for failure. So we haven't taken them away completely, but we definitely, in the summer, they're
gone.
They're out of sight, out of mind, and they don't even ask for them. They don't have that attachment with them. So, but then there's a 30-minute limit, and it's maybe 3 days a week, if that. So really a total of like an hour and a half per week. So I don't really, after reading Glow Kids, it will scare you to death. To be honest, it was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe this. And it talks about video games with boys and social media more with girls. But it does have a whole chapter in there about education and using screens in education and kind of like the business side of it. And really it's just like about money. And so we have to like find that balance there. So I feel like as parents, with that information, I can just control and teach them awareness of some separation and teach them how to find a very healthy balance between it's okay to do a little of it, but we got to do a lot of other stuff too.
Right.
And so that was the biggest takeaway I read from the book because I'm not perfect. I mean, we're not perfect, but the book helped me find a balance and understand the dangers and how I can control it.
Yeah. I talked about this a little bit on opening day, and it's one of those things, Instagram has not come back to my phone, right? It's
You
not.
deleted yours too.
I
Like,
got
it's
rid of all
gone.
of
You
it.
got rid of it, huh?
I did.
Yeah.
Instagram has not come back to my phone. I've replaced it with other things probably at some point in time. But I think about, like, I'm more aware, but it's really still hard to change,
Oh yeah.
right? And that's awareness. So, like, what drives us to make the change, I think, is the big part of this. And so, like, for me, it was a ceremonial step of, like, I'm deleting my Instagram account.
Yeah.
This is going to make me better. But the reality is, like, I walk into a room, same thing. My kids are 12, 14, and 16. My wife it's a long day. We've gone through 6 hours of practices combined or whatever it is. And we're all on our phones instead of interacting in a room
Right.
together.
Yeah.
My kids are like, but my screen time is down, right? Like, because we've had this discussion about screen time,
Yeah.
right? And so, but my screen time is down. So I'm only using this 2 hours a day, Dad, right? Yeah. But the difference is, like what you said, like, how do we have the face-to-face interaction?
Right.
Yeah. And when do we have the time for that? And I wouldn't want my kid to choose, but this is my time for my screen time over this is my time for my family too. I mean, there's not a whole lot of hours in the day, honestly.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things I thought was interesting, I'm going to talk about it here for a second before we get into the next topic on the list. But, I watched the other day, as you start having the conversation, right? People start sending me news articles. People start sending me videos. Prince Harry was talking to the author of The Anxious Generation in a sit-down interview and talking about something. So, this is coming through an interview and spoken not from the book. But one of the things I thought was interesting that the author said was that Meta, TikTok, and Snap are controlling our kids' lives because of the algorithms, because of the new, the scrolling. They're getting a curated look at life, right? We talked about it last night in my own house. My mother-in-law was in town. They were talking about the new Nordstrom rack that opened up in Mason, and my wife and mother-in-law were like, what are we going to do tomorrow? Should we go shopping for a little bit? Oh, Mom, there's a new Nordstrom rack. Within 2 minutes, Facebook feed, Nordstrom rack ad, right? And
Just by conversation.
Right.
through conversation,
So
right?
scary.
So
I know.
scary, right? So scary. Curated advertisements, feeds, whatever the case may be. And I think you think about that. I've begun to think about that more, right? Like, it's not just about the education. They're selling a product, right? That's how they make their money. And we have to be aware of that as parents.
Yeah. And
Right.
I've also heard that we are the product. I mean,
Absolutely.
in some way. I mean, us as humans, we are the product. And
Right.
Yeah.
There is a Netflix show, Social Dilemma. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And it does talk a little bit about that too, of how you just talk about something and the ads pop up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it is designed to keep us constantly hooked and interested.
And always going back to your phone, and
Yeah.
and the notification comes, so you're always checking your phone, and it kind of hardwires it into
it's a
you
cycle.
that
Yeah, so I think the other part of that is, like, the idea that we have lost this sort of play-based childhood for kids, right?
Yeah.
That we have replaced it with devices, right? Instead of a physical book to read, we give them, the ebook, the tablet, whatever it is, with the idea they're going to read a book on it.
Right.
But there's more to it than that. And so, again, I think just thinking through with awareness comes a decision, and we'll talk a little about that as we go through this. But I'm looking at this next section here because I think you guys have read the book The Anxious Generation, correct?
Yeah.
I'm on the beginning of the book. It's a big one, by the way.
It's a big one. It's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information. It's a big, heavy book, and I hate to admit this. I don't know if I've told the two of you this before, but, like, I'm not an avid reader. So I tell people this all the time. They wonder how I got into education and administration. I was a math guy. Sometimes it's painful for me to, like, sit down and just, like, power through a book.
Right.
Yeah. I've gotten really good at audiobooks, and Amazon Audible has become my friend. But we're going to be hosting some community discussion groups And we rolled this idea out at a community parent focus group recently. Some of the moms that were there, even dads that night, like I saw them the next couple of games, next couple of days at some games. They're like, I went and I got my book. It's coming on Thursday. I'm excited to read this, and like I'm ready to go. Right. And so I'm like, oh, maybe there's something to this, right? Yeah. That as a community we can start to maybe have some conversations around this. But I want to ask the question about, like, you in the book, The Anxious Generation. It's talking about children born from like 1999 or later, right? And the idea that, when I was a kid, I had the Nokia brick phone in college, right? I got the flip phone. I thought it was so cool, the Motorola Razr. And I remember getting my first smartphone. But I also now can look back and think I was teaching at the time, and the kids that got their smartphones, and I couldn't imagine an elementary kid having a smartphone at that time. A, they were expensive. B, like there was no reason for them to have them. Now everybody's got them. Right? And so just as you talked in this rabbit hole journey that you're on, right, as you're thinking about this, what stood out to you about the Anxious Generation book? What's something that I think a takeaway from you from that book that you want to talk about?
I mean, I think when you read Glow Kids, it was almost really terrifying. But then when you go and read The Anxious Generation, it was really informative because it compared history. It compared, like the 1960s, and it also compared to other countries as well. And it also gives you a solution at the end. It kind of walks you through it, and it gave me a peace of mind of, we had TVs growing up, and I feel like we turned out okay, and we were on screens too. So it gave me a peace of mind that no one's saying we need to just eliminate screens entirely.
Yeah, this is not technology is bad. We should go back away.
No, it's amazing. I mean, the technology advancements are amazing. So that was one takeaway of it taught me a good balance. And I think one thing after, like it even talked about, I heard you say play-based play-based learning. Yeah. So there's pictures in the book that shows a playground from like, I think the 1960s. And it's like, that's scary. A little too much.
That's a little bit too much,
really
right?
Get hurt, right? And then it shows the playground of, and I kind of remember, you might remember more than me, but it's one of those spinny things.
Oh yeah.
That has like the
those
rail.
Those things were awesome until people's legs started getting broken.
Yeah,
right?
But it talked about how it taught boundaries as far as you might get hurt, but you'll be okay. So it gave kids some boundaries of how far can I push it, where is my fear limit. But you have to work together in order to move it and spin it and make it more fun, right? Yeah. So there's so many things that go into one very simple playground equipment, right? But now we have playgrounds that are just fully walled and no one can really ever get hurt on the playground.
If it's something you can ride on, you're strapped in. Part of it was learning even your limits as a kid, knowing how fast you can climb or how far you're going to climb without, hitting the barrier and getting scared. But learning those limits is something that's really important as you're growing up and developing.
So one of the things that he says in the book, and it's early on in the book, it's like one of the main premises of his research is that we are overprotecting in the real world, and underprotecting in the digital world.
Yes, I remember reading that to you because I read it before him.
Right.
I was like, this is such a true statement.
Right.
So last week I was down at Donovan for their Fuse Day, which kind of anti-bullying and look at things down there. I spent the morning with a group of fourth graders and had a small group. There was 6 or 8 kids. I'm in my small group, and I had to explain to them kind of, if you knew me, if you were my best friend, you would know, right? And because we wanted them to be able to talk to each other about things that people maybe don't realize about them, to find some common ground. So I had to think back to when I was a 4th grader, right? And talk as if I was a 4th grader was the job for me. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, if you knew me, you would know that my best friend and I ride our bicycles every day, right? And so I talked for 30 seconds to a minute, told like a bunch of little things like that. The first question from a 4th grader was, where did you ride your bicycle to? And my answer was, everywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
We went towns away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? We did these things. And so I think and they're like, whoa. They were so shocked that my parents let me ride out of eyeshot of the house and be gone for hours on end in 4th grade or whatever. And the flip side of that, right? And I talked to my wife Emily about this. Like, oh, that's real. Like, Emily, they're going to be okay, right? Like, Owen's 12. He's fine to ride his bike to the friend's house a couple streets over. And we didn't think we were overprotective parents,
Right.
but like that's like is he going to be okay?
Oh yeah.
Thing. But his point is, we're handing these kids supercomputers that connect them to the entire world.
Right.
Right.
They
Without
give them
any
access to
control.
anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Without any control. And I think, what I'm excited to kind of get into and look at, and part of the discussion is, what are the implications of that then, right? What's happened as a result of that?
Right.
Underprotecting in the digital world is allowing them access to so many things
Right.
that we have no idea.
Right.
But we're overprotecting them in the ability to make decisions. How high can I climb on this thing that looks like a death trap before I realize this is my limit, right? Or what do I do? And I think so. Finding that balance as parents, I think, is really important. And so I'm kind of a little jealous. Like I said a little bit ago, this book was written in 2016.
Yeah.
Right, 2016, my kids would have been 8, 6, and 4.
I know.
Yeah.
Right, before devices.
Right.
Before devices for us. And so if I knew some information then, I'd like to think that I would have done some things differently.
Yeah.
Right.
You're on the front end of this, right? What does this look like for you as a parent, kind of knowing where you are today with